Hi again. This is Dee Marley with the History Bards podcast, and we are welcoming historical fiction author Paul Fitzgibbons. Thank you for being on the show today, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me, Dee.
Great. And as a way of introduction, we'd love for you to give our listeners a little bit of brief bio about you and your books.
All right, that'd be great. I actually write under the name Jack Everly,
Okay.
and I've always been writing stories, and for a while now, I've been bothered by something that happened in my hometown in 1983. And this has led me to use all of my collected knowledge in writing a historical novel. And really excited about getting that out there, getting that going off the ground, and we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah,
Really looking
absolutely.
forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And can you tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer and what got you into writing this historical fiction?
Well, I've always been writing stories, and then I actually came into the possession of an immense body of knowledge about the prehistory of Western civilization.
Oh,
And this information is too good and too incredible not to be passed down. I can't think of anyone alive today who would not benefit from this knowledge. You won't hear it anywhere else, and it's particularly singular. A lot of it comes from the Bible, from the Quran, from Greek mythology, from a lot of different sources, but they all point to a very, very traumatic natural disaster that happened about 5,000 years ago, 4.5 to 5,000 years ago. And this set the tone for everything that happened afterwards in world history. There would be no world history if it wasn't for this event, which is sad because it's based on trauma.
yeah.
And that's why I've decided to tell my story and relate it to this tragic event that happened in my past in my hometown.
Oh, wow. Well, that sounds really fascinating. So can you tell us a little bit more about the book? About like the premise, the storyline?
Right. Well, and like I said, the main premise is that this young 14-year-old boy killed himself in 1983, and that's going to be the basis of my story. But there's going to be a history class that plays a central role. The kids in the history class get transported back to the origin of Western civilization.
Wow.
That's actually based on a history teacher that I had that I always loved, who taught us so much about the Sumerians and the ancient Greeks. And this story will tell exactly where his knowledge ended and where actual world history began, because the Greek pantheon and the Greek political system and most of what the Greeks are was actually imported from Eastern Turkey. That's something a lot of people are not aware of. As a matter of fact, a lot of their stories, a lot of their myths were taken directly from earlier sources. And this is important because a lot of their stories have very volcanic qualities.
Yeah.
And there is no volcanoes in ancient Greece, whereas in Eastern Turkey, for example, there's one volcano whose crater we can see from space. And this is basically the inciting incident that fuels not only my book, but world history in general.
Wow.
And I'm
That
going to be tying that all together with this suicide.
Oh, wow. That's really amazing to be able to like connect those two. I think that's really fascinating. I love when stories do that. So that's brilliant that you were able to do that. Can you
Right.
tell us a little bit about, so when you said that you came across this information, so is this the particular reason why you chose this era? Because of the information that you had?
Yes, that's exactly why. Yes, I've actually been writing for the last 3 years. I've been writing a nonfiction book
Okay.
about this incident, this inciting incident that shaped world history, with a co-author who is actually from the region, but he's living in Germany now, and he speaks about 7 languages, and thankfully, English isn't one of them, which meant because of my knowledge of German, I was able to translate his story, and that's how I got on board in this whole project. So that's what fueled my interest in this era, and why I am passionate about bringing this to a wider audience. Like I say, this knowledge isn't anywhere right now. No,
Mhm.
you can't get your hands on it, no matter how hard you try.
Wow, well, that's pretty fascinating. That's just a real
Yes, so
incentive for somebody to pick up this book and read it, for sure. So let me ask you,
I
have you
hope
ever,
so. I hope
yeah,
so. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So let me ask you, have you been able to travel to the areas that you're talking about?
We've actually been all around the world, and unfortunately, Eastern Turkey is not one of the regions that I've been. First of all, it's a godforsaken place.
Mm,
You would never have thought that everything that is in the world today could have came out of this region, because there's literally nothing there.
mhm,
There's the city of Van, which is on Lake Van. It's a lake that's about the size of Great Salt Lake. You can see it on the map if you look at Eastern Turkey. But other than that, all around this area, it's totally empty. It's a wasteland basically. So no, I haven't been there, but this research has allowed me to really experience the region in full. Uh, and it's just a fascinating corner of the world, singular. There's no
yeah.
place like it.
Yeah, that's very true. I have a cousin who's lived in Istanbul for quite some time,
Oh, wow.
but
Yeah.
she's moved on to Poland now. But
All right.
actually, so yeah, I was able to like hear some of her stories about living there, and
Yeah,
the culture and the area is just so fascinating.
it
Really, really
is.
fascinating.
It really is. Yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of people are unclear about exactly what it means because the Eastern Turkey, for example, that actually belongs to northern Mesopotamia.
Hmm.
So everything that was Mesopotamian that later influenced the Greeks and the Romans and everything else, it started there and traveled downriver into what we know as Sumer.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was just an amazing, really special corner of the world.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So,
Mhm.
just to kind of give us a little tidbit of the research that you did, we would love to
Right.
know if there was something just really obscure that you found that you would love to share with us that kind of, influenced your book.
Yeah, I'd love to. In 1994, the American Daniel Quinn came out with a book called
Mm,
Ishmael, and it was made into a movie with Anthony Hopkins, but I'd rather not get into that. It should be a book, and that's it. But there was he mentioned in there something very interesting, and this it sort of scraped the surface of everything our nonfiction book got into. The region itself, uh, in northern Mesopotamia, in eastern Turkey, actually belonged to the Caucasus. There was Caucasians living there at the time, which means that the people that later became the Hebrews were in contact with Caucasians from the very beginning, and which also means that the person named Cain, who was a farmer, was a white man. And this, I found that blew my mind back then when I first heard it, because that means that the actual oppressors of the Hebrews were not Egyptians. The Hebrews were never in Egypt. The actual oppressors of Hebrews were white people like you and I. and that was a little hard to swallow. And in the book we explain why that happened that way, and actually what we can do about it. Yeah, it's a really sensitive topic for many, I
Yeah.
understand, but it makes sense because the mark of Cain had to be something that people could see from a very far, large distance,
Hmm.
and it makes sense that it's just white skin.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
So I thought that was
Yeah,
yes,
that's definitely an obscure little piece of research that people wouldn't know
right,
about. Yeah, that's really
yeah,
fascinating. So let me ask you this, and going into that, because you kind of talked about that's an obscure part of the research you did. Was this part of the most difficult part of writing about this book, or what was the most difficult part?
um, the most difficult part, to be honest, was to work with a co-author.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this co-author is. I'd rather not say anything to him about personally, but he has his own views like everyone else,
Yeah,
and it's been very difficult. He understands little of American culture, which is difficult because he wants Americans to read the book.
yeah.
So he wants to have his own viewpoint, but without understanding who his reader should be.
Mm,
So it's been really hard to get this nonfiction book uh, really written the way I would love for Americans to appreciate it.
right. And
That's
that really is like a really good tidbit that you just pointed out is as an author, you have to know who your audience is.
right,
You know,
right,
that's told
yeah,
over in every like writing
right.
manual that you can think of. You have to
I
know who
know.
your audience is.
I know, and that's really been something I've had a hard time imparting to my co-author, and
Right.
which is another reason why I wanted to write this fictionalized version. I've always been more interested in fiction anyway,
Yeah.
and then with a fictionalized version, I can really speak to the reader in a one-on-one conversation, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Well, do you have a favorite line or passage from your book that you'd like to share?
oh, I'd love to. I don't. Wait a minute. I'm gonna try and do something here. I don't know if this is gonna work for our
Okay.
viewers. Um, uh, I need to find. Here we go. But on that day, the sun broke through the clouds and revealed to him that some battles just can't be won, and it was useless to fight them. The lion may roar with a voice that booms like thunder and carry for 9 miles, and his ferocity, while brawling, be unparalleled, his strength immeasurable, and his heart the very burning core of earth itself. But if the opponent proves to be too tough, too clever, too prepared, too strong and quick, if the adversary turned out to be none other than life itself, then the king of the jungle will fall. And that just really that exemplifies the battle that this main character, this young 14-year-old, had with himself and the world around him.
Yeah.
How he felt, and it also tells us how hard it is for each one of us to reach our full potential. All of
Yeah.
these things are in our way. They're
Yeah.
inside our minds, which is the hardest thing about it to accept. And these are the things we're going to have to deal with if we ever want to be the people who we were meant to be.
Yeah. That's very poignant. Thank you for sharing that. And again, that's just a little slice of what people can expect to read whenever they read your book. So thank
Mm.
you very much for sharing that. Very poignant. So let me ask you this, as a historical fiction writer, or just as even as just a writer, what kind of advice would you give to young writers who are starting out?
That's a good question. I always appreciated it when people were helping me
Mhm.
get move my work forward. So that's why I'm going to say what I wish that people had told me back then. And that's first of all you have to put in the work. You really have to be disciplined. Uh, by not writing, you're increasing the chances that your work will not be finished the way you picture it to be.
Right.
The earlier you start, the more intensely you pursue your dream, the swifter the results.
Yes.
You have to read, yeah, especially if you read similar books that inspired you. You can read these books and ask yourself what was so special about them. Why did they work? Why did they influence you so much? Or
Yes.
if they didn't influence you, why not? Yeah, what was missing in them?
Yes.
And most of all, I think that the thing I wish writers in general and me myself would realize at the very earliest point is to get organized.
Yeah.
Then things are just not gonna happen if you don't have a plan and stick to this plan as much as possible.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice. And you kind of talked about, reading. I think that's an excellent advice that you have to be a good reader to be a good writer.
Right.
And so I would love to know if there was something in your life that really resonated with you that kind of like moved you and impacted your life and set you on the path to becoming a writer.
Yes, that's. Oh, I love this question. I go back to it every time. Actually, right before this happened, this must have been around 1981. A friend of mine, back in the era when I was just interested in running around on the playground and being a monster, he gave me the Call of the Wild by Jack London,
Mm,
and he basically forced me to read this book, and it really solidified things. First of all, it was extremely interesting reading an entire novel written so well in the point of view of the dog.
yeah.
Yeah, I had never seen that done before, and that was fascinating. But then to see that nature, the role nature played in this book, really solidified something that was in my mind the whole time.
Yeah.
Was that nature is, and what isn't nature isn't. Yeah, that means
Mm,
everything else is basically illusion. Something that we're deluding ourselves really exists, and we have to start paying a lot more attention to nature. Let's say it like that, and that's another motivation for both the book I'm writing now and the nonfiction book that we're finishing up with.
okay, well, that's great. And
Right.
and along those same lines, I would love to know, do you have a favorite saying or quote that you live by? It kind of tells the listeners about you as an author.
Um, I, 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 okay, I'm gonna roll with this one. If if you're, I'm a very, I'm attuned to humor. Yeah, humor is my bread and butter. So naturally, I picked the quote from humor, but I have to admit, if you are squeamish, I apologize right now. I really do. But I just discovered this quote, and it epitomizes everything I am, because it you have to be able to think and appreciate this quote.
Mhm.
You have to be able to think in a different way. And I
Yeah.
think we're all too used to thinking in a conventional manner, which is, so I'm just going to go ahead and read this quote.
Okay.
It's from Mitch Hedberg, which was an original thinker in his own right,
Yes, he
who,
was.
yes, he once said that a severed foot is the perfect stocking stuffer. And like I say, that's something as a humorist I can really appreciate, and that pretty much sums up. And I'm not afraid to look at the dirty aspects of life.
Mhm.
You know, what's hinted behind the facade,
Right.
and
Right. And historical fiction lends itself to being able to really
right,
look into those details about history, things that people may not know, and being real about it.
right, yeah. I love how history anyway. looks at the causes of things.
Yeah.
You can't resolve a problem unless you look at the causes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's basically what I'm all about.
Well, we thank you so much. We really appreciate you being on the show today, and we're
Uh,
looking forward to this book. Can you tell, do you have a title?
it's called Ilaru, which is an Inuit word. It's a feeling of awe and fear that one gets, like when you're walking in the forest and you turn around go around a bend in the path and you stand face to face with a grizzly.
Oh,
That's what Ilaru is, and that's the feeling I want to impart to people when they see this body of knowledge that I'm actually writing about. It's the same thing
okay.
I felt when I discovered it.
Well, yeah, I just got chills for some reason whenever you said that. So I
Yeah.
definitely, that's amazing. So we're looking very forward to this book. Do you have a projected timeline for it?
I do not. I'd love to be finished by the end of this year with the book, and then we'll see where the publication process takes us.
Okay. Well, for all of the fans listening in, you can, do you have a website link that people can follow you at?
Right now, I'm on LinkedIn. Jack
Okay.
Everly. Jack Everly is my name there, and it'd be
Okay.
great to talk to and make contact with any interested reader.
Absolutely. So what we'll do is you can send that link over to me and we'll make sure and put that in the description so that listeners can find out more about you and your book and when it's coming out.
Wonderful. Looking forward
Okay.
to it.
As
Yeah.
always, we thank everyone for listening, and please don't forget to subscribe. Coming up, our next episode will feature historical fiction author Elise Hoffman. This is DK Marley, and with Jack Everly with the History Bards podcast. Keep making history and keep listening.